I'd like to welcome everyone in the audience and those watching on television and on the web. I will call this meeting to order, Public Services Committee at 4:46. Since Councilman Karski did it earlier, I guess I need to do it also. My son is 6 years old today, so I just wanted to say happy birthday to Mr. Braylon. So happy birthday, buddy. Are there any amendments to the meeting from May 13th, 2014?
Move to approve the minutes from May 13th.
Second.
Move to approve Urbanbach, second by Rick. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? No. Minutes are approved. The next item on our agenda is the 2012 International Property Maintenance Code Heat and Supply. Any presenters here, please come forward.
Good afternoon, Ron Bell with Building Services. Apparently what we're looking at is Chapter 6 of the International Property Maintenance Code, and just to give a background, our Property Maintenance Code is the national model code. It's called the International Property Maintenance Code, 2012 edition, that defines the minimum of minimums for life safety requirements in existing structures. Typically, Building Services has a whole bunch of codes that deal with new construction and minimum standards for new construction. This is the only one that really deals with maintenance to assure that any place where somebody lives, works, plays, or whatever, it maintains at least minimum life safety standards. And apparently what got brought to the council's attention was section 602, and that's heating facility requirements. And Chapter 6 deals with both mechanical and electrical requirements as far as just determining minimum standards for both residential and commercial structures. But 602.2, which I think that everybody's got a copy of and it's on the screen also, deals with the fact that the code requires that dwellings be provided with heating facilities that's capable of 68 degrees Fahrenheit in all habitable rooms. It goes further to say that you can't depend on cooking appliances or portable unvented fuel burning appliances as a source of heat. It's very specific about that. Section 602.3 deals with a municipality to insert the times of the year when it is mandatory that the heating facilities are available for those occupants to maintain the 68 degrees within their structures. And since this is a national code, obviously there's a different heating season in Arizona as compared to Alaska or Maine or whatever. When we adopted this in 2000, we took a look at the typical heating time period, which extended obviously from October to March, and we took it a month either way. So what we inserted was that the heating supply has to be on and operable between September 1st and April 30th, which is 8 months out of the year. And again, this is really just simply inserting that time period into the National Model Code. You'll also see some overstriking in this also, and the reason for the overstriking is that there's a reference in here for use in Appendix D of the International Plumbing Code. Well, the city doesn't adopt the International Plumbing Code. We're mandated by the state to utilize the Uniform Plumbing Code, so that's what that exception is. So, very, very short. That's what has been in the code since the 2000. We've adopted 2000, 2003, 6, 9, and 12, and we've had those dates in there since the first International Property Maintenance Code came to be here in Sioux Falls.
Thank you. Are there any other presenters? Then we'll move to questions.
I had brought this up at an informational meeting. It was decided by the council to bring it forth to this committee to review it. And the reason I brought it up was I had a phone call from an individual who was in an apartment complex, and that cold spell that we had a month or so ago, and he was unable to heat his apartment because the landlord apparently had turned off the boiler system in his apartment complex, like all of them usually do. at some point turn them off. In this case, the landlord, as soon as he was notified, went out and turned it back on. It took a few to heat. Was able, but he was happy. I just brought it up as perhaps a chance to adjust the dates in the ordinance to allow for just a little more flexibility. I've come to learn from the beginning. I talked to a couple landlords. There's a lot of good reasons to shut the system off and to allow the landlords a time to close down their boiler systems, to drain them, to do proper maintenance. Plus, these heater systems produce heat all the time while they're on, and if they were to stay on all summer, their air conditioning units would be fighting against the boiler system that's just naturally circulating, not trying to heat anything. But there's lots of good reasons to have a downtime. But I thought just perhaps we could adjust the timelines just a little bit. I don't know, the weather seems to be, all this global warming talk, I guess I don't understand maybe, but here's a good example where the weather didn't work with the timelines that we had, and all the landlords were following the ordinance as they should and were, and yet they got kind of caught. So no violations really by what the landlords were doing, but maybe we need to just change the ordinance by adding 15 days, who knows, just something. And I thought maybe, I think there's somebody here from the National Weather Service and some of their history and some freezing, thawing temperatures, frost stuff, some history to give us maybe a better outlook, but I just was encouraging the committee to review the dates. That's all.
Thank you. Any other presenters?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just would ask, because I know we do have somebody from the Weather Service, if you could come and just talk to us about, it's not global warming, it really is climate change, and we saw it this year. So maybe you can talk to us about that a little bit. Is this something, is this for real? Is this a concern that we should have? Can you tell us about that a little bit?
I wish I could give you any real good answers. My name is Mike Gillespie. I'm with the National Weather Service here in Sioux Falls. Climate is always changing. There was a period of fairly rapid growth in the 90s, 2000s. Then the last 10 years or so, the global temperatures have pretty well leveled off. And some areas are getting hotter, some areas are getting colder. The only thing I can say is some of the studies we have seen is with the changing global climate, extremes have a higher chance of occurring than they would in the past. A couple studies I can say is we're looking at maybe about a 20% chance increase in seeing these extremes, both hot, both cold, wet, and dry. So can't really say that it's always going to be like last year or it's always going to be like it was 3 years ago. It's all, the weather is different from the climate, but so you're going to have these variations from year to year. But on average, the extremes are probably something we're going to be looking at a lot more.
So if I might, instead of talking about then the climate, can you talk about the weather in this area? We have a chart that shows frost, freeze, and hard freeze, early, average, and latest. Can you talk about that? What does that mean to us? Does it matter?
It's basically, whatever your rules are. We were asked to see what the earliest date of 36 degrees, 32, and 28, the average date over the climatic record for Sioux Falls, and as well as the latest, be the earliest fall, the freeze, the earliest last event in the spring. So, for example, where it has the earliest less than 36, that would be the earliest date of that in a year that we dropped below 36 and did not fall below 36 again after that.
Does that tend to be, what time of day does that tend to be? Is that a nighttime thing, generally, when it's really cold like that?
Generally, to see your low temperatures are going to occur anytime between, say, and we're looking at April and May time periods. Your low temperatures generally are going to occur, say, between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Counselor?
Yeah, I'm not sure who to ask this question of, but the way the proposed ordinance is we're going to April 30th, right? What?
What it is now.
That's the way it currently is.
Okay, let's see.
It currently goes from September 1st to April 30th.
And so we're
They
going
have to supply the heat.
Yeah, and we're going to change that to,
Whatever you want to change it to.
Right now, there's not been any proposed changes.
oh, okay.
There's no changes. What has been in place since 2000 has defined the heating facilities to be in place September 1st in the fall through April 30th in the spring.
So is anybody proposing a certain date?
We've had this for 5 or 4 code change cycles, and we had no intention of changing it, short of what the council would choose to do.
Oh, okay.
Councilman?
Madam Chair, if I could just toss something out to Councilor Staggers. One of the things that comes to my mind, we're talking about, you know, I don't know whether it's climate change or the weather is just in a bad stretch right now, is that we don't race to put our tomatoes in the ground so much anymore. And we're more, so we put our tomatoes in the ground later in Sioux Falls, in this area anyway. And we tend to have tomatoes late in September and early in October anymore because it feels like over the last several years, the seasons are kind of changing. And it may be part of just a random change and it's going to change back. We don't know that, but I think that's what we expect this year. And these folks are concerned about that. And I guess I would propose, I mean, for the committee to think about, let's think about changing that from April 30th to May 15th. And see what council wants to do with that. You know, I would make that a motion that we change that to May 15th and move it to the council.
Is there a second? Councilor?
And I'm wondering on the September 1st end, how necessary is it to have the boilers in full operation on September 1? Maybe it's possible to just simply to adjust it back to September 15th and then May 15th. And so we still have the same time period. But I guess I'd like to have a little bit more information about what those daytime temperatures average September 1. Seems to me that the daytime temperature is going to be higher than what it would be on April 30th, or May 1st. I mean, often we have May temps and just in the 40s for daytime highs. But again, a little bit more information would be helpful, and maybe even from some of the complex owners and operators.
So I was going to say, Councilor Erickson, we do have representation from the Multi-Housing Association in the audience, so if you'd like to hear from them.
Is there anybody from the Multi-Housing Association that would like to address these concerns?
Dan Sifkin, Director of Government Affairs, South Dakota Multi-Housing Association. Not opposed to having the conversation whatsoever. A hard and fast date, I can see it, but it's only to make sure that they have to turn the heat on, that they do supply the heat. 20 years in the Army, I've been sitting at Fort Hood, Texas on Thanksgiving, could see myself in the engineers the heat on because we haven't managed to get to December 1st. What the phone call that Councilman Jameson received, got a little background on that. The individual had 6 unauthorized pets. He was notified to either get rid of the animals or face eviction. It was then after this that this took place. Also, if you look at the weather the week before, we were in the high 70s and the 80s. Common sense has to prevail. The boiler is one system, the air is a different system. 2 different thermostats. One of the shared earlier, air conditioner set at 72, boiler set at 72. Looking at the boiler, seeing that only 1 unit in the building is demanding heat. Checks into it and says, turn off the air conditioner. So if we don't turn off the boiler, they're going to have the windows open, air conditioners going, and the heat. We're not going to be good stewards of the environment also. So all we ask is common sense, have no problems with the way things are currently. And I think one complaint in 12 years is a pretty good track record.
Thank you. And it's my understanding the landlord turned it on immediately to ensure that that tenant had heat as well. The motion has been made by Councilor Urbanbach to send this to the council. Is there a second for that to move it and get more information to the council? Do we want to delay this to get any questions answered?
I think we're creating a problem here, and it's unnecessary. It seems to me that I've never heard of this issue before. For the years I've been on the council, it just seems to me that landowners, even though they might not be looked upon with great regard, they do have common sense, and they're going to make sure that their tenants have heat. So I think that we should just simply...
That dies for lack of second. Any open discussion? Is there any other items that anybody would like to discuss at this time?
That's okay.
Move to adjourn.
Yeah.
Second?
We are adjourned.